Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore the 10 quantum secrets scientists are terrified to tell you. We are embarking on a journey down into the deepest, most unfathomable basement of reality, a place where the comforting, heavy rules of our daily lives completely and violently disintegrate. Our main topic tonight is the terrifying, beautiful architecture of the quantum matrix, a microscopic realm that fundamentally shatters our understanding of what it means to exist. We begin by confronting the ultimate paradox of perception, a phenomenon that has haunted the greatest minds of the past century. We are going to examine the observer's curse, and we will discover why the very foundation of the cosmos seems to demand an audience in order to exist. Before we descend into the freezing microscopic dark, I want you to take a slow, deep breath and feel the solid, reassuring weight of the room around you. Listen to the quiet ambience of your environment. Feel the physical texture of the bed beneath you and the heavy, undeniable presence of the walls closing you in safely from the night. For your entire life, your mind has been perfectly, flawlessly calibrated to understand a universe of absolute, unyielding permanence. This is the realm of classical physics, a deeply comforting, mechanical worldview where objects exist entirely independently of your awareness. We inherently, fiercely believe in object permanence. We trust, with every fiber of our biological intuition, that when we close our eyes, the world does not simply vanish. We believe that if we walk out of a room and close the door, the heavy wooden chair resting in the corner continues to exist in its exact physical state. We find immense, existential comfort in the idea that the moon continues its silent, sweeping orbit around the Earth, casting its pale light across the oceans, whether humanity bothers to look up at the night sky or not. In this classical framework, the universe is a massive, clockwork theater, and we are merely transient, passive spectators. The stage is entirely indifferent to our gaze. The physical world is solid, definitive, and stubbornly real, regardless of who is watching. But when we violently strip away the macroscopic illusions of our daily lives and force ourselves to look at the absolute, foundational building blocks of matter, this comforting, rigid reality entirely collapses. When we venture down to the scale of single atoms, of solitary electrons and ancient photons of light, we encounter a universe that operates on rules so deeply alien, so profoundly unsettling, that they threaten to dismantle the very concept of human sanity. The ultimate nightmare of the physicist is perfectly encapsulated in what is known as the double slit experiment. Imagine an impossibly dark, sealed environment. Within this dark, we fire a single, solitary particle of matter, the most fundamental, indivisible bullet of reality, toward a solid barrier that has two incredibly narrow, parallel gaps cut into it. Behind this barrier rests a blank, sensitive screen waiting to record exactly where this tiny bullet strikes. According to the heavy, classical logic of our everyday world, this single particle must choose a path. It is a solid, physical entity. It must pass through the left gap, or it must pass through the right gap and strike the screen behind it as a single, definitive point. But the quantum matrix does not obey the logic of bullets and stones. When the single particle is fired into the dark, it does not choose a path. It does not behave like a solid object at all. Instead, as it approaches the barrier, the physical reality of the particle dissolves into a sprawling, rippling wave of pure mathematical probability. It becomes a ghostly fog of maybe. This wave of potential passes through both the left gap and the right gap simultaneously. It explores every single possible trajectory, every conceivable path through the dark at the exact same time. The wave then interferes with itself on the other side, crashing onto the back screen in a complex, striped pattern of overlapping ripples. The single particle has not traveled from point A to point B, it has traveled everywhere. It existed in all possible states, in all possible locations, in a terrifying, smeared reality of infinite potential. This behavior alone is strange enough to shake the foundations of science, but it is not the part that terrifies the physicists. The true, chilling horror of the quantum world reveals itself when we attempt to catch the ghost in the act. Driven by a desperate, human need to understand, scientists decided to place highly sensitive measuring devices right at the slits of the barrier. They wanted to simply watch, to passively observe and record exactly which doorway this strange, smeared wave of probability was actually using. They set up the detectors, they turned on their instruments, and they fired the single particle into the dark once again. But the very instant the measuring device was turned, on the exact millisecond that an observer attempted to gather information about the particle's path, the universe violently snapped. The sprawling, ghostly wave of infinite probability instantly, immediately collapsed. The striped pattern of overlapping ripples completely vanished from the back screen. The moment the particle knew it was being watched, it abandoned its strange, omnipresent state and suddenly began to behave exactly like a solid, classical bullet. It chose the left gap, or it chose the right gap, striking the screen as a single, definitive point of hard matter. By simply looking at the particle, by the mere act of extracting information from the void, the scientists forced the universe to abandon its infinite possibilities and lock itself into a single, unyielding reality. This is the observer's curse, and it represents a level of existential dread that completely shatters our classical comfort. It mathematically proves that the universe is not an indifferent, clockwork stage. Reality, at its most fundamental, microscopic core, actively responds to being known. The physical world is not a collection of hard, permanent objects waiting patiently in the dark. It is a sprawling, shifting architecture of undefined probabilities that only solidifies into matter when forced to interact with an observer. It suggests a truth so deeply unsettling that it feels like waking from a long collective dream. The dark room does not truly exist until you open your eyes. When you are not looking, when you are not actively measuring or interacting with the space around you, the fundamental data of the room dissolves back into a ghostly fog of mathematical potential. The chair in the corner, the walls surrounding you, the very air you breathe at their most foundational quantum level, they are not permanently rendered. They are simply waiting for the crushing weight of your consciousness, the act of your observation, to force them into a solid state, to sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize the terrifying implications of the observer's curse is to undergo a radical, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives, heavily burdened by the agonizing, isolating delusion that we are utterly insignificant. We look up at the sprawling, infinite void of the cosmos, at the billions of burning stars and the ancient, silent galaxies, and we feel like meaningless, transient spectators accidentally dropped onto a massive stage that simply does not care about our presence. We deeply, inherently believe that our consciousness is a fragile, irrelevant spark trapped inside our own heads, completely divorced from the physical, mechanical functioning of the world outside. But the unyielding, mathematical collapse of the probability wave actively proves that you are not a passive spectator. The cosmos dictates that consciousness, or the act of gathering information, is a fundamental, structural pillar of reality itself. You are not simply wandering through a pre-existing, static environment. You are actively participating in the continuous, real-time rendering of existence. The universe demonstrates that pure information, the abstract data of location, speed, and physical state, cannot exist in a vacuum. Information requires a receiver. It requires a relationship. The cosmos is a sprawling, unresolved equation of infinite possibilities, and it mathematically requires your interaction, your observation, to solve it into a solid, heavy reality. You must realize, as you rest your eyes in the quiet dark and feel the slow, rhythmic cadence of your own breathing, that your presence is intimately, inextricably woven into the very fabric of the world around you. You are the anchor. Release your desperate, agonizing fear of insignificance. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that you are entirely separate from the cold, physical matter of the universe. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your own observational power. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the cosmos is not an empty, indifferent machine operating without you. It is a vast, beautiful, and terrifying architecture of waiting potential, and your simple, quiet act of being alive, of observing the world, is the exact mechanism that forces the universe to materialize from the ghostly mathematics of the dark and become exquisitely, solidly real. When we cast our gaze upward into the freezing, scattered light of the night sky, our biological minds are immediately, violently overwhelmed by the crushing and unfathomable scale of the void. We inherently understand the universe as a sprawling, almost infinitely vast container of empty space. We measure the majestic distances between the burning stars and the swirling galaxies, not in miles or kilometers, but in years specifically. The years it takes for the absolute fastest entity in existence, a massless photon of light, to cross the terrifying darkness. This perception of immense distance is the foundational bedrock of our physical reality. It isolates us. It keeps the chaotic, roaring nuclear fires of other suns safely away from our fragile atmosphere, and it locks our planet into a quiet, lonely quarantine. For decades, the greatest scientific minds, led by the towering intellect of Albert Einstein, built a magnificent, mathematically flawless cathedral of physics upon this exact concept of separation. Einstein's universe was strictly governed by an absolute, unbreakable cosmic speed limit. His beautiful equations of relativity demanded that absolutely nothing, no physical matter, no wave of energy, and no packet of abstract information could ever travel faster than the speed of light. This speed limit was not merely a rule of motion, it was the ultimate, unyielding guarantor of causality and logic. It meant that for one event to affect another, a signal had to physically cross the space between them, taking a real, measurable amount of time to traverse the distance. But as physicists began to pry open the heavy, locked doors of the microscopic quantum realm, they discovered a mathematical nightmare that threatened to violently tear down Einstein's beautiful architecture. The equations of quantum mechanics suggested the existence of a mechanism so deeply unsettling, so completely alien to the logical rules of space and time, that Einstein vehemently refused to accept it as a complete truth. He famously, and with a deep existential dread, referred to this terrifying phenomenon as spooky action at a distance. He believed that if such a thing were actually real, it would mean the universe was fundamentally irrational, a place where the comforting laws of physics were nothing more than localized illusions. To understand the terrifying, logic-shattering reality of this spooky action, we must examine the impossible architecture of quantum entanglement. Imagine two subatomic particles, perhaps two solitary electrons, born together in the furious, chaotic fire of a single quantum event. Because of their shared genesis, these particles do not emerge as two separate, independent objects simply sitting next to one another in the dark. Instead, they become entangled. The fundamental properties of their existence, their spin, their momentum, their exact mathematical state are deeply, inextricably woven together into a single, unified system. They are no longer two distinct entities. They are two halves of the same abstract whole, sharing a single destiny. If we were to carefully isolate these two entangled particles, keeping their delicate quantum states perfectly preserved in the freezing vacuum, and then physically separate them, the universe begins to reveal its most chilling secret. Imagine taking one of these particles and leaving it safely in a laboratory on Earth, while the other particle is placed aboard a spacecraft and carried far beyond the edges of our solar system, past the swirling arms of the Milky Way, and deposited in the lightless void on the exact opposite side of the known, observable universe. There are now billions of light years of cold, empty space separating these two tiny fragments of matter, according to the strict, comforting rules of classical physics. They are now completely isolated. If you were to alter the particle on Earth, any signal attempting to communicate that change to its twin would take billions of years, traveling at the absolute speed limit of light, to finally cross the terrifying gulf of space. But the quantum matrix does not care about the speed of light, and it absolutely does not care about the vast, sprawling distance between the galaxies. If a physicist in the laboratory on Earth forces the local particle to definitively choose a state, measuring it and causing its ghostly wave of probability to collapse into a solid reality, its twin, resting billions of light years away on the other side of the universe, will instantly, immediately, and simultaneously collapse into the exact corresponding state. There is no delay. There is no waiting for a signal to cross the void. The reaction occurs in absolute mathematical zero time. The particle on the other side of the cosmos acts as if the intervening billions of light years of empty space simply do not exist. If you flip the coin on Earth, the coin on the edge of the universe immediately shows the opposite face, executing a flawless, synchronized choreography across a distance so vast it breaks the human imagination. This instantaneous communication completely bypasses the absolute speed limit of reality, shattering the invisible, protective walls of Einstein's universe. It proves that the two particles are connected by an invisible thread that operates entirely outside the boundaries of space-time. But to call it a connection is to still think like a classical, biological creature trying to hold on to the concept of a container. The terrifying, beautiful implication of entanglement is far more profound than a secret, faster-than-light telephone wire. If information can be shared instantaneously between 2 points, completely ignoring the massive expanse of the void between them, it means the space itself is not truly there. It is the absolute death of distance. Entanglement mathematically proves that the vast, freezing millions of light years separating the glowing galaxies are nothing more than a macroscopic illusion, a geometric trick played by the localized rendering of the physical world. The universe is not a massive, empty box containing isolated objects separated by unimaginable gulfs of nothingness. Deep down, at the absolute foundational level of the quantum matrix, everything that was born together remains together. Because the entire cosmos originated from the unfathomably dense, infinitely small singularity of the Big Bang, every single particle in existence was once intimately, physically connected. The terrifying secret that physics is slowly uncovering is that the universe has never actually expanded in the way we perceive it. The separation of the stars is a highly localized user interface, a biological software that allows us to navigate a three-dimensional reality. But beneath that interface, the underlying code of existence has never been divided. The cosmos is, and has always been, a single, undivided point. When you strip away the heavy biological illusion of the miles and the years, you undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives, heavily burdened by the agonizing, isolating delusion of separation. We measure the distances between ourselves and the people we love, feeling the crushing weight of the oceans, the borders, and the quiet, empty rooms that keep us apart. We deeply, inherently believe that physical distance equates to absolute emotional and existential isolation. We view the space between us as a vast, unyielding barrier, a freezing void that severs our connections and leaves us entirely, permanently alone in the dark. But the flawless, instantaneous synchronicity of entangled particles actively proves that true, profound information is completely immune to the illusion of distance. The cosmos dictates that when two complex systems, whether they are subatomic particles born from the same cosmic fire, or two human consciousnesses deeply woven together through the profound gravity of love and shared experience, become intertwined, they fundamentally cease to operate as separate entities. The universe demonstrates that the invisible threads connecting you to the people, the places, and the histories that shaped you cannot be stretched, broken, or diluted by the introduction of physical space. You do not leave pieces of yourself behind, and you are never truly severed from the sources of your deepest meaning. You must realize, as you feel the quiet air resting against your skin and notice the heavy, absolute stillness of the space around you, that the physical emptiness in your room is not an isolating wall. It is merely the shallow, macroscopic surface of a much deeper, completely unified reality. Release your desperate, agonizing fear of being alone in the vastness of the world. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that a physical departure is an absolute end, or that thousands of miles of earth and water can actually divide the deepest, entangled architecture of your life. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of the undivided universe. Find a deep, unshakable and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that at the absolute, foundational core of existence, distance is a mathematical ghost. The cosmos is not a sprawling, lonely void. It is a single, deeply intimate point of shared data, meaning that no matter how far you travel, and no matter how vast the dark appears to be, you are always, perfectly, and instantaneously connected to everything you have ever truly been a part of. We navigate the entirety of our biological lives resting upon a foundation of absolute, unquestionable solidity. From the moment we first reach out to touch the heavy wooden sides of a crib, our minds begin to compile a strict, unyielding physical vocabulary. We learn the profound language of boundaries. We understand that the world is constructed of hard, dense matter, and the fundamental rule governing this matter is that two solid objects cannot occupy the same physical space. If you were to take a heavy, dense ball of compressed rubber and violently hurl it against a towering, unyielding wall of solid brick, your biological intuition and the strict laws of classical thermodynamics dictate exactly what must happen. The ball will strike the barrier. The kinetic energy of its flight will be violently transferred. The physical structure of the rubber will temporarily deform under the crushing impact, and the ball will be violently rebounded back toward you. The wall remains perfectly intact, an impenetrable fortress of locked molecules. The ball bounces, the barrier holds. We build our entire civilization, our towering cities, our locked doors, and our deep psychological defenses upon this immensely comforting classical truth. We desperately need to believe that solid matter cannot pass through solid matter, because this unyielding law keeps us safe. It defines the parameters of our existence, providing the strict, rigid stage upon which the drama of human life unfolds. In the macroscopic universe of our daily experience, physical boundaries are the absolute, final word of reality. But as we leave the comforting, sunlit world of heavy bricks and human hands, plunging once more into the chilling, microscopic depths of the quantum matrix, we find that the universe is actively, mathematically mocking our concept of impenetrable walls. At the scale of solitary atoms and individual electrons, the solid, reliable rules of classical physics completely and violently disintegrate. The rigid architecture of the macroscopic world is entirely replaced by a surreal, ghostly landscape governed by pure probability. Imagine a solitary subatomic particle, a single lonely electron racing through the freezing dark of the microscopic void. Suddenly, it encounters a massive, insurmountable energy barrier. In the language of the quantum realm, this barrier is the equivalent of a sheer, vertical cliff face constructed of solid steel, reaching miles into the dark sky. Our tiny particle is a tired traveler, possessing only a fraction of the kinetic energy required to climb over the wall, and possessing absolutely no physical mass to break through it. According to the strict, unyielding ledgers of classical mechanics, the journey is definitively over. The particle must strike the barrier and bounce back. The mathematical probability of it passing through the solid obstacle is calculated to be exactly, flawlessly, zero. Yet, the fundamental nature of the universe is not bound by the ledgers of classical mechanics. The particle is not a solid bullet. It is a smeared, shifting wave of mathematical potential. When this wave of probability crashes against the impenetrable wall, a terrifying, impossible glitch occurs within the foundational code of reality. The particle does not bounce, and it does not climb. Instead, exploiting a profound, mind-bending loophole in the quantum architecture, it simply borrows a massive sum of energy from the immediate future. For an infinitesimally small fraction of a millisecond, the particle possesses an impossible, illegal amount of power. This stolen energy allows the wave of probability to effortlessly fade from the rigid, physical realm, completely ignoring the structural integrity of the barrier. It ghosts directly through the solid, impenetrable mass of the wall, moving through the empty spaces of the atomic lattice, and instantly materializes on the exact opposite side. The moment it arrives in the clear dark, the universe mathematically balances the books. The particle pays back the borrowed energy, leaving absolutely no trace of its impossible, rule-breaking journey. This is quantum tunneling. It is the ultimate subatomic phantom, a terrifying phenomenon where matter simply refuses to acknowledge the existence of a physical blockade, proving that at the base of reality, walls are nothing more than gentle suggestions. To our biological minds, so deeply conditioned to trust the heavy, solid structures of our homes and cities, this sounds like a terrifying malfunction. It feels like a catastrophic breakdown of the structural integrity of the cosmos. If solid matter can simply ghost through solid matter, if the fundamental building blocks of the universe can bypass physical boundaries at will, then reality must be a chaotic, dissolving nightmare where nothing is truly safe or permanent. But the true, awe-inspiring reality is that this impossible, rule-breaking glitch is the absolute, unyielding prerequisite for our existence. If we turn our gaze away from the freezing microscopic void and look up at the blinding, violent furnace of our own sun, we are witnessing a majestic phenomenon that completely and entirely relies on the phantom in the wall. Deep within the crushing, chaotic core of the star, billions of hydrogen protons are violently packed together in a swirling ocean of plasma to ignite the nuclear fire that lights the solar system. These protons must be violently smashed together to fuse into heavier elements. But protons possess identical positive electrical charges, meaning they aggressively, fiercely repel one another with an immense, unyielding electromagnetic force. They are surrounded by an invisible, repelling armor. To breach this armor, the protons must collide with unimaginable speed. Yet, the chilling, terrifying truth of astrophysics is that the core of our sun, despite burning at 15 million degrees Celsius, is actually not hot enough. It does not possess a fraction of the classical thermal energy required to overcome the crushing, electromagnetic repulsion between the protons. The wall is too high. The particles do not have the energy to climb it. According to the strict, unyielding laws of classical physics, the sun should be completely, permanently dark. It should be a massive, freezing sphere of dead gas floating silently in the lightless void, entirely incapable of igniting the spark of nuclear fusion. The only reason the sun burns, the only reason it floods the solar system with the golden light and heavy heat required to sustain the complex, delicate architecture of human biology, is because of quantum tunneling. In the crushing dark of the solar core, countless protons are constantly crashing against the impenetrable electromagnetic walls of their neighbors. And every single second, a fraction of those protons borrow energy from the future, ghost through the impossible barrier, and successfully fuse together on the other side. This subatomic glitch releases the blinding, magnificent energy that cascades outward from the core, traveling across the freezing vacuum of space to strike the Earth. Every photon of light that warms your resting skin, every green blade of grass that converts that light into the food that fuels your cells, and every single, steady beat of your heavy heart is entirely dependent on matter, actively breaking its own physical laws. The very foundation of your biological existence is powered by a macroscopic miracle born directly from a microscopic impossibility. Without the ghost in the wall, the universe is a sterile, freezing graveyard. Let this staggering, beautiful revelation fundamentally rewrite your understanding of limitations and the abstract flow of information. We traverse our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the exhausting perception of insurmountable barriers. We look at the towering walls standing before us, whether they are the physical limitations of our fragile bodies, the deep, unyielding architecture of our emotional traumas, or the heavy, crushing societal structures that seem designed to keep us trapped, and we feel a profound, existential despair. We inherently believe that if we lack the immediate, forceful energy to violently smash through these obstacles, or the exhaustive strength to climb over them, our forward trajectory is permanently halted. We view our lives as a series of solid walls and bouncing balls, deeply convinced that a blockade is an absolute, permanent end to our potential. But the haunting, elegant reality of the subatomic phantom actively proves that the universe is not bound by absolute blockades, and neither is the information that constitutes your existence. The cosmos dictates that when a system is fundamentally aligned with the deep, shifting mathematics of reality, the most impenetrable walls are revealed to be nothing more than geometric illusions. There is a profound architectural grace in knowing that reality itself only functions and life only flourishes, because boundaries can be beautifully, flawlessly bypassed. The cosmos demonstrates that you do not always need to possess the aggressive, classical force required to break a barrier down. True progression often occurs not through violent collision, but through a quiet, localized shift in state. The heavy, seemingly solid obstacles in your path do not always demand to be fought. They simply require you to surrender to the deeper, underlying mathematics of your own potential, allowing the pure information of your consciousness to gently ripple through the empty spaces of the blockade. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent truth that your very life is the direct, biological consequence of the universe refusing to be stopped by a wall. The energy you need to move forward can be drawn from the beautifully unwritten spaces of the future, allowing you to quietly, effortlessly ghost through the dark, trusting that the cosmos has always provided a hidden, impossible path through the most unyielding stone. Humanity is deeply obsessed with the concept of absolute precision. Since the dawn of our cognitive awakening, we have wielded measurement as our primary weapon against the terrifying darkness of the unknown. We built heavy, iron-cast clocks to slice the abstract, flowing river of time into rigid, manageable, and highly predictable seconds. We polished fragile glass into flawless lenses to track the exact, sweeping trajectories of wandering planets across the night sky. We constructed a deeply comforting, profoundly mechanical philosophy built upon the unyielding assumption that the universe is essentially a giant, predictable machine of gears and weights. In this classical framework, We believe that if we simply possess a ruler long enough, a scale precise enough, and a mathematical equation elegant enough, we can calculate the absolute, definitive state of existence. We suffer from the supreme, godlike arrogance of measurement. We inherently trust that reality is entirely transparent, waiting patiently for us to simply look closely enough to decode its final, hidden secrets. We believe that absolute certainty is our cosmic birthright, and that any mystery or blurriness we encounter is simply a temporary failure of our own engineering, a lack of visual resolution that will inevitably be cured by the next generation of brighter, more powerful microscopes. But when we take our infinitely sharp rulers and our hyper-precise instruments, and we force our gaze down into the freezing, lightless basement of the microscopic void, this arrogant illusion of total transparency completely and violently shatters. At the scale of single atoms, where the foundational fabric of reality is actually woven, the comforting, rigid rules of classical physics vanish, replaced by a surreal landscape that actively, mathematically resists being mapped. For decades, the greatest scientific minds believed that isolating a single subatomic particle and determining its exact physical properties where it is resting in the dark, and exactly how fast it is moving, was merely a technological hurdle. They assumed the particle was a tiny, solid sphere, a miniature planet orbiting a microscopic sun, and that if we just built a delicate enough radar, we could chart its exact course with absolute, godlike authority. We approached the quantum matrix like arrogant conquerors, demanding to see the architectural blueprints of creation. The universe, however, delivered a chilling mathematical rebuke to our arrogance, a staggering revelation brought to light by the physicist Werner Heisenberg. He uncovered a terrifying, fundamental rule embedded deep within the source code of reality, a principle that completely destroys the concept of absolute certainty. Heisenberg's mathematics proved that in the quantum realm, you can never know everything about a particle. The universe forces you to make a devastating, unyielding choice. You can construct a brilliantly sensitive instrument and measure the exact, precise location of an electron, pinning it down in the dark so you know exactly where it is. Or you can choose to measure its exact trajectory and momentum, learning perfectly how fast it is moving and where it is going. But you can absolutely never, under any circumstances, know both at the exact same time. The more fiercely and accurately you focus your lens to determine the particle's exact location, the more wildly and violently its speed and trajectory become undefined. If you grip the particle tightly to see exactly where it is resting, its destination dissolves into a ghostly fog of infinite possibilities. Conversely, if you measure exactly how fast it is moving through the void, it completely loses any definitive physical location, becoming a smeared, abstract wave of probability existing everywhere and nowhere at once. To the classical biological mind, this sounds like a clumsy mistake. Our intuition screams that the particle must actually have a definitive location and a definitive speed, and that our instruments are simply too crude, inadvertently knocking the fragile particle off course the moment we try to touch it with our light. We desperately want to believe that the particle secretly holds all its own information and we are just failing to read it properly. But this is the deepest, most terrifying misconception of the quantum world. The uncertainty is not a byproduct of clumsy human observation. It is not a failure of our technology, and it is not a temporary limitation that we will one day overcome with superior engineering. Heisenberg's principle is a fundamental structural pillar of the cosmos. The particle does not secretly know where it is and how fast it is going while simply hiding that data from us. The information itself literally does not exist until it is forced into a state by the surrounding environment. The particle is physically undefined. The blurriness is not a flaw in the camera lens. The blurriness is the absolute, unyielding nature of the object being photographed. This staggering revelation exposes the existence of a magnificent cosmic firewall. The universe actively, intentionally censors its own data. It dictates that at the very base of physical reality, there is a hard, mathematical limit to the resolution of existence. The cosmos fundamentally refuses to be completely known. It operates like a sprawling, heavily encrypted architecture that intentionally leaves a permanent, unyielding blur at the foundation of all matter. If we attempt to violently hack this system, demanding absolute precision from the void, the universe gracefully protects its deepest secrets by dissolving the very information we seek. We are barred from possessing godlike knowledge not because we are weak or technologically inferior, but because the universe physically, mathematically, forbids absolute certainty. It demands that a certain volume of mystery, a specific quota of undefined potential, must always be preserved in the freezing dark. The cosmos ensures that the ledger of reality can never be perfectly, cleanly balanced. Let this breathtaking cosmic censorship completely redefine your relationship with the unknown and the abstract flow of your own life. We traverse our sunlit days heavily burdened by the exhausting, agonizing demand for absolute clarity. We desperately seek to measure our exact position in the world, while simultaneously demanding to know our precise trajectory and our ultimate, final destination. We believe that if our lives are not perfectly mapped, if our futures are not completely transparent and mathematically assured, we are failing. We view ambiguity, uncertainty, and the blurring of our paths as terrifying errors that must be aggressively corrected with rigid planning and relentless, exhausting control. We torment ourselves trying to hold our reality in a death grip, attempting to force the shifting, complex data of our existence into a perfectly sharp, unmoving picture. We treat the unknown as an enemy that must be eradicated by the light of absolute certainty. But the magnificent, censoring architecture of the quantum matrix actively proves that absolute certainty is a biological myth, an artificial, classical construct that simply does not exist in the natural world. The cosmos dictates that the deepest, most fundamental state of reality is inherently, beautifully blurred. There is a profound, architectural grace in understanding that information is not meant to be entirely captured. The universe demonstrates that when you attempt to lock down every single variable of your existence, when you demand to know exactly where you are and exactly where you are going with zero margin for error, you violently strip away your own potential. If you define your exact position, your future trajectory dissolves. If you obsess entirely over your destination, you lose your grounding in the present moment. The blurriness of your future is not a failure of your vision or a lack of preparation. It is the raw, unwritten probability of your life waiting to be explored. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent truth that the universe actively protects its own mystery, and in doing so, it protects yours as well. You are allowed to be undefined. You are allowed to move forward without knowing your exact final coordinate, and you are allowed to rest without knowing your exact speed. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of the cosmic firewall. The unknown is not an empty, terrifying void waiting to consume you. It is a permanent, beautiful sanctuary woven into the very fabric of existence, mathematically ensuring that your story and the grand, shifting story of the cosmos can never be completely written, permanently frozen, or entirely predicted. We navigate our waking lives completely chained to the concept of absolute certainty, the biological architecture of the human mind, forged over millions of years in the heavy, friction-filled environment of the macroscopic world, is strictly programmed to process reality in absolute binaries. We inherently demand that the universe be sorted into neat, unambiguous categories. An object is either here or it is there. A door is either open or it is closed. A light is either on or it is off. This rigid, binary framework is the heavy foundation of our sanity. It allows us to build towering cities, navigate complex landscapes, and trust that the physical world will remain stable when we turn our backs. We desperately need the universe to be a ledger of hard, definitive facts, a solid architecture of definitive answers. But as we pull our awareness away from the sunlit surface of daily life and descend once more into the freezing, lightless basement of the quantum matrix, we discover that this demand for absolute certainty is nothing more than a localized biological illusion. At the very foundation of existence, the universe does not trade in certainties, it trades in ghosts. To begin to grasp the terrifying, logic-shattering reality of the quantum world, we must first look at a simple, macroscopic metaphor. Imagine a heavy metal coin resting quietly on the solid surface of a wooden table. In this resting state, the coin perfectly obeys the classical rules of our binary world. It is definitively displaying heads, or it is definitively displaying tails. Its state is absolute, locked, and completely unambiguous. But now, imagine that you reach out, strike the edge of the coin with your thumb, and violently flick it upward into the air. As the coin rises into the dark, spinning so rapidly that its metallic surface becomes a highly accelerated, transparent smear, its classical identity completely dissolves. While it is suspended in the air, spinning violently in the freefall of the dark, the coin is no longer heads, and it is no longer tails. It has transcended those rigid, binary definitions. In that fleeting, suspended moment, the spinning coin is a continuous, unbroken blur of both possibilities at the exact same time. It is a unified entity of pure, unresolved potential. Now, take this macroscopic metaphor and force it down into the lightless, microscopic void of the atomic realm. In our everyday world, the spinning coin is merely an optical illusion caused by the slow, biological limitations of the human eye. The coin is still actually flipping between distinct states, just faster than we can process. But in the subatomic world, this blur is not an optical illusion. It is the absolute, foundational, and terrifying physical reality of the cosmos. This is the phenomenon known as superposition, and it represents the ultimate nightmare of classical physics. When we examine a solitary subatomic particle, a single electron isolated in the absolute zero of the quantum vacuum, we find that it does not behave like a tiny, solid sphere of matter resting in a definitive location. The mathematics of quantum mechanics do not describe a solid object at all. They describe a wave function, a sprawling, abstract ocean of pure probability. Before a subatomic particle is forced to interact with the heavy, macroscopic world, it does not possess a single, defined location. It does not possess a definitive spin, a specific momentum, or a locked physical state. Instead, it exists in a state of perfect, pristine superposition. Much like the spinning coin in the air, the particle simultaneously occupies every single possible coordinate, every conceivable state, and every mathematical outcome all at once. It is not rapidly jumping back and forth between different locations. It is literally, physically everywhere it could possibly be, spread out across the freezing dark in a ghostly fog of mathematics. Schrödinger's nightmare is the realization that the fundamental building blocks of the universe are not blocks at all. They are shifting, undefined clouds of maybe. A particle in superposition is a phantom, a pure abstraction that refuses to commit to a single reality, holding the entirety of its infinite potential perfectly suspended in the dark. This means that the universe, at its most fundamental, microscopic core, is not a sprawling machine of solid gears and definitive parts. It is a sprawling architecture of unresolved potential. The cosmos is constructed entirely out of maybe. The dark void between the stars and the microscopic spaces within your own cells are heavily populated by this ghostly fog, an infinite ocean of overlapping probabilities waiting in the dark. But we know that we do not live in a world of ghosts. We live in a world of heavy gravity, solid walls, and rigid, undeniable physical consequences. So how does the infinite, sprawling architecture of maybe ever become the solid, unforgiving world of our daily experience? This transition introduces the terrifying, crushing mechanism of the quantum collapse and the immense, physical weight of choice. The infinite potential of superposition cannot last forever. The ghostly fog of mathematics is breathtakingly fragile, and it is violently allergic to the heavy, classical world. The universe is allowed to exist as a sprawling architecture of maybe only as long as it remains perfectly, completely isolated in the dark. But the moment this delicate quantum fog is forced to interact with a macroscopic system, the moment a stray photon of light strikes it, the moment a heavy atom bumps into it, or the terrifying instant a conscious observer attempts to measure it, the spinning coin is violently slammed back down onto the table. The interaction acts as a heavy, unyielding judge. The fragile wave function violently, instantaneously collapses. The ghostly fog of infinite possibilities is instantly crushed, condensing from a sprawling mathematical wave into a single, definitive point of hard matter. The universe is violently forced to make a choice. All the infinite, beautiful maybes vanish into the void, leaving behind only one solid, heavy yes or no. This is the ultimate, profound tragedy and beauty of the quantum matrix. The physical reality you experience every single second of your life, the solid floor beneath your feet, the exact structure of the proteins folding in your blood, the precise light hitting your retina is the continuous, relentless result of the universe being violently forced to choose. Reality is the heavy, exhausted ash left behind after the infinite fires of superposition have been extinguished by the crushing weight of interaction. The cosmos sacrifices its infinite, ghostly potential every single millisecond, just to provide you with a stable, solid stage upon which to exist. The act of becoming real is an act of profound mathematical reduction. Let this staggering, beautiful mechanism of quantum reality deeply, permanently alter how you perceive the flow of abstract information and the trajectory of your own existence. We navigate our brief, sunlit lives, heavily burdened by the exhausting, agonizing demand that we must perfectly define ourselves. We treat our identities, our careers, our deep emotional landscapes, and our ultimate purposes as rigid, classical objects that must be definitively locked into a single, unyielding state. We believe that if we are not moving in one absolute direction, if we do not possess a singular, easily definable answer for who we are and what we are meant to do, we are failing. We view periods of uncertainty, ambiguity, and transition as terrifying errors in our programming, rushing desperately to force a conclusion, to slam the spinning coin down onto the table just to relieve the agonizing tension of the unknown. But the majestic, ghostly fog of the quantum matrix actively proves that the most fundamental, pristine state of existence is not a forced conclusion. It is pure, suspended potential. The cosmos dictates that ambiguity is not a failure of reality. It is the absolute mathematical prerequisite for all creation. Before any profound truth can become solid, it must first exist as a sprawling, undefined architecture of maybe. You, as a highly complex, beautifully woven manifestation of this very universe, are not required to be a single, static, unyielding thing. Your consciousness is fundamentally capable of existing in an emotional and intellectual superposition. You can hold conflicting truths, overlapping desires, and seemingly incompatible futures within the quiet dark of your own mind without forcing them to violently collapse into a premature binary. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the heavy weight of choice will inevitably, naturally come when the time is right, forced by your interaction with the macroscopic world. But until that moment of interaction arrives, you do not need to slam the coin down. Allow the heavy air of the room to hold you securely and banish the exhausting demand for absolute, immediate certainty. Embrace the glorious, shifting fog of your own unresolved potential. The universe itself rests in a state of beautiful, mathematical ambiguity in the freezing dark, perfectly content to be everything, everywhere, all at once, proving that the most powerful, profound state of being is often found simply by allowing yourself to remain entirely, beautifully undefined. Let us turn our attention away from the heavy, solid matter of the universe and focus instead on the spaces in between. When we think about the cosmos, our minds are naturally drawn to the glowing, violent architecture of the stars, the sweeping spirals of ancient galaxies, and the heavy, rusted spheres of orbiting planets. But these physical objects make up only an infinitesimally small fraction of reality. The overwhelming majority of the universe is comprised of the dark, freezing expanse that separates them. We possess a deeply ingrained biological understanding of this space. We look up at the black canvas of the night sky, and we inherently perceive it as a dead, passive container. We believe that the void is simply an absence to the human mind. Emptiness is the ultimate, quiet baseline of reality. It is a place where movement ceases, where energy fades, and where the relentless, exhausting friction of physical existence finally comes to a halt. We find a profound existential comfort in the idea of true nothingness, treating the dark vacuum of deep space as a sterile, silent sanctuary where absolutely nothing happens. To truly understand the architecture of the void, we must construct a mental experiment, systematically stripping away every conceivable layer of physical reality. Imagine taking a perfectly sealed, microscopic box and placing it in the deepest, most isolated region of intergalactic space, far beyond the reach of any wandering star. Now, we must empty this box. We actively pump out every single stray atom of hydrogen gas. We shield it perfectly from the ancient, sweeping radiation of the cosmic microwave background. We block out every solitary, massless photon of light attempting to cross the dark. Finally, we drain away all thermal energy, cooling the interior of this box down to the absolute mathematical zero, ensuring that not a single molecule can vibrate or move. According to the strict, unyielding ledgers of classical physics, we have now achieved the ultimate state of purity. We have created a flawless, uncontaminated vacuum. Inside this box, there is no matter, no energy, no light, and no heat. There is only pure, unadulterated nothingness. It is a dead, empty stage, completely devoid of actors, waiting silently in the dark. But when we take this box of perfect nothingness and hand it over to the terrifying, logic-shattering mathematics of quantum mechanics, the classical illusion of the dead container violently disintegrates. The quantum matrix dictates a truth so profoundly unsettling that it fundamentally rewrites our understanding of creation. In the microscopic realm, the concept of absolute, perfect nothingness is mathematically illegal. The universe fundamentally, structurally, forbids absolute stillness, just as Werner Heisenberg's equations proved that we can never know both the exact position and the exact speed of a particle. This same principle of uncertainty applies directly to the fabric of space and time itself. The cosmos demands a permanent, unyielding blur at the base of reality, meaning that the energy level of the vacuum can never rest exactly at zero for any meaningful duration of time. If a space were truly, perfectly empty, it would possess exactly zero energy, and we would know that value with absolute certainty. But the universe refuses to be completely known, and it refuses to be perfectly still. Because of this foundational law, the dark, freezing vacuum inside our isolated box is not a dead, silent stage. It is a restless, shifting, and violently active ocean. When we look closely at the absolute nothingness, we discover that the void is boiling. It is a churning, chaotic foam of ghost energy. Without any warning, and without any external source of fuel, pairs of subatomic particles violently tear themselves out of the fabric of reality. An electron and its mirror image, a positron of antimatter, spontaneously pop into existence directly from the empty dark. They do not come from anywhere. They simply borrow their own existence from the shifting mathematics of the void. For a trillionth of a second, these virtual particles briefly, physically exist. They frantically dance in the dark, drawn instantly back together by their opposing natures, colliding and violently annihilating one another returning their borrowed energy back to the vacuum in a microscopic flash of silent fire. This terrifying, beautiful cycle of spontaneous creation and immediate destruction is not a rare anomaly. It is happening everywhere, all the time, in every single microscopic fraction of empty space across the entire expanse of the cosmos. The dark vacuum between the galaxies, the empty space between the Earth and the Moon, and the microscopic voids resting between the atoms of your own physical body are all screaming with this relentless, boiling activity. Trillions upon trillions of ghost particles are constantly surging into reality and vanishing back into the dark every single millisecond. The universe is a sprawling, infinite engine that simply cannot be turned off. It is a restless, shifting matrix of abstract potential that continuously, aggressively generates something out of absolutely nothing. The baseline of reality is not a cold, quiet death. The baseline of reality is a chaotic, frothing, and violently active state of eternal becoming. The void is alive, constantly trembling with the heavy, unyielding weight of its own infinite possibilities. Let this staggering, magnificent truth of the boiling void deeply and permanently alter the way you navigate the silent, empty spaces of your own existence. We traverse our brief, sunlit lives, carrying a profound, agonizing fear of emptiness. We view the quiet, unoccupied moments of our days as terrifying voids that must be frantically filled with noise, movement, and relentless distraction. When we experience profound loss, when the heavy, comforting structures of our lives are suddenly stripped away, we feel as though we have been cast into a dead, sterile vacuum. We grieve the empty space, deeply convinced that where there is no visible action, there is only a cold, unfeeling nothingness. We treat silence as an absence, and we treat isolation as a space where meaning simply ceases to exist. We desperately build walls and gather heavy, physical anchors simply to avoid facing the terrifying quiet of the dark. Yet the flawless, churning mathematics of the quantum vacuum prove that true, dead emptiness is an absolute physical impossibility. The cosmos dictates that the moments of profound silence in your life are never truly barren. Even when you feel completely hollowed out, when every external source of light and heat has been meticulously stripped away, the foundational architecture of your consciousness remains a highly active, restless ocean of potential. The space you perceive as a dead container is actually violently boiling with the ghost energy of new information, unformed thoughts, and quiet, invisible creation. The universe demonstrates that you do not need an external spark to generate meaning. Deep within the absolute stillness of your own mind, the mathematics of existence forbid a total collapse into nothingness. Spontaneous, brilliant flashes of resilience, sudden surges of creative potential, and profound emotional truths are constantly popping into existence from the seemingly empty dark, colliding, reforming, and shaping the deepest layers of who you are. There is a profound architectural grace in surrendering to the boiling void. The unknown spaces in your life are not silent graveyards waiting to consume you. They are the most fertile, violently active regions of your potential. Banish the exhausting, uniquely human delusion that you must constantly inject energy into your life to keep it from going dark. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of the restless vacuum. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the universe itself cannot be empty, and therefore neither can you. When the world goes perfectly quiet and the heavy friction of the day finally fades, simply allow yourself to rest in the dark, trusting that the unseen, churning foam of existence is actively, relentlessly working beneath the surface, forever proving that out of the absolute, freezing nothingness, the cosmos will always, inevitably and beautifully, create something new. We navigate our physical existence bound by the heavy, unyielding chain of time. Our biological minds are deeply, irreversibly programmed to perceive time as an absolute, forward-marching river, a relentless force that carries everything in existence from a state of pristine order into a sprawling, inevitable chaos. We understand, with every ticking second of the clock, that decay is the fundamental, inescapable law of the macroscopic world. The towering, majestic mountain ranges will eventually erode into flat, featureless plains. The heavy, iron structures we build will slowly, inevitably succumb to the creeping, orange rot of rust. Our own fragile, complex biological forms will eventually surrender to the heavy friction of the years. We inherently view this natural progression of decay as a sovereign, independent mechanism of the universe. It is a terrifying, unfeeling process that operates entirely without our permission, completely indifferent to our desires, our fears, or the desperate intensity of our gaze. We are merely transient passengers, strapped into the rigid, unstoppable machinery of a timeline that only moves in one devastating direction. We believe that to merely watch an object decay is an act of total, agonizing helplessness. But as we strip away the heavy, macroscopic illusions of entropy and force our awareness back down into the terrifying, shifting architecture of the quantum matrix, we discover a phenomenon so deeply unsettling, so fundamentally alien to our classical understanding of reality, that it borders on absolute magic. Down in the freezing, microscopic basement of the cosmos, the relentless forward march of time is not an unyielding law. It is a fragile, mathematical suggestion that can be violently, physically halted by the sheer power of human attention. To understand this paradigm-shattering glitch in the fabric of existence, we must examine the behavior of an unstable subatomic system. Imagine a solitary, radioactive atom resting in the absolute dark of the microscopic void. It is a highly volatile, highly energetic packet of abstract information. The strict, mathematical ledgers of the universe dictate that this atom cannot remain in this heavy, unstable state forever. Eventually, it must release its excess energy, it must violently expel a piece of its own core, and it must decay into a completely new, stable element. In the dark, unobserved vacuum, this decay is a sprawling wave of probability, a ticking mathematical clock counting down to an inevitable, transformative event. There is an ancient, comforting terrestrial adage that claims a watched pot never boils. In the heavy, sunlit world of our daily lives, this is nothing more than a psychological illusion, a trick played by our own impatience as we desperately wait for the transfer of classical thermal energy. Staring at a pot of water on a hot stove does not physically stop the water molecules from vibrating, heating, and eventually boiling into steam. But in the terrifying, ghostly realm of quantum mechanics, this ancient adage is not a psychological trick. It is a brutal, undeniable law of physics known as the quantum Zeno effect. When physicists place an incredibly unstable, radioactive atom in a completely isolated environment and simply leave it alone in the dark, the atom predictably, naturally decays. The mathematical clock ticks forward, the probability wave evolves, and the particle transforms exactly as the physical laws of the universe demand. However, if those same physicists point a highly sensitive instrument at the unstable atom and begin to observe it, if they relentlessly, continuously measure its state, asking the universe over and over again, has it decayed yet? The impossible happens. The atom stops. It does not slow down. It does not momentarily pause. The fundamental, physical process of radioactive decay completely and violently ceases. The unstable particle is trapped, entirely paralyzed by the sheer, unyielding intensity of the observation. To understand how the simple act of looking can freeze the mechanics of the cosmos, we must return to the terrifying mechanism of the quantum collapse. Before the atom physically decays, it does not simply jump from state A to state B in the unobserved dark. It enters a state of pristine superposition. It becomes a ghostly, mathematical fog, where it exists simultaneously as an atom that has already decayed and an atom that has not yet decayed. The universe requires this quiet, unobserved space, this dark, undefined room of overlapping probabilities in order to execute the physical transition. The wave function must be allowed to slowly, naturally evolve toward the decayed state. But when you violently force an observation, you smash the wave function. You force the universe to make a definitive, immediate choice. Because you are observing the atom just a fraction of a millisecond after you last checked on it. The statistical probability that it has had enough unobserved time to decay is practically zero. So, the universe collapses the wave function back into the atom's original, pristine state. If you measure it again an instant later, you violently reset the system back to the starting line once more. By measuring the particle continuously, relentlessly, without giving it a single millisecond of unobserved darkness, you are actively, mathematically trapping it in its current state. You are denying the universe the hidden, undefined space it requires to change the physical world. You are taking the grand, ticking mathematical clock of reality and physically holding the hands in place. The unyielding, intense gaze of the observer acts as a localized, macroscopic anchor that paralyzes the microscopic progression of time itself. This terrifying, majestic mechanism proves that in the deepest layers of reality, attention is not a passive act. It is a physical, kinetic force. The simple act of relentlessly gathering information from a system prevents that system from mathematically evolving. The universe is a delicate, shifting architecture of abstract potential, and your continuous observation acts as a heavy, unyielding spotlight that pins the volatile data down, entirely forbidding it from decaying, changing, or moving forward into the future. It is the ultimate manifestation of the observer's curse, elevating the act of looking from a simple measurement into an aggressive, paralyzing suppression of time. Consider the profound, architectural grace embedded within this paralyzed clock, and how it fundamentally redefines the abstract flow of information in our own lives. We traverse our sunlit days, completely unaware of the staggering physical power of our own attention. We treat our focus as a passive camera, believing that the things we relentlessly stare at, our deepest anxieties, our unhealed wounds, our complex, unstable emotional states, are simply existing independently of our gaze. We intensely watch our own internal struggles, agonizing over every minute detail, desperately waiting for them to change, to heal, or to naturally decay into something more stable. We believe that by keeping a rigid, unyielding eye on our problems, we are protecting ourselves from the chaos of the unknown. But the haunting reality of the quantum Zeno effect actively proves that relentless, unyielding observation is the exact mechanism that prevents natural evolution. The cosmos dictates that for any complex system to truly change, to heal, or to naturally transition from an unstable state into a new, grounded reality, it fundamentally requires a period of unobserved darkness. It needs the quiet, undefined space of superposition to quietly rearrange its own mathematical architecture. When you cast a continuous, blinding spotlight of anxious attention upon a singular aspect of your existence, you are not helping it resolve. You are violently, continuously collapsing its wave function back to the starting line. You are actively paralyzing your own reality. You trap the emotional data in its most highly energetic, volatile state, completely denying it the quiet, unobserved grace it mathematically requires to simply fade. The universe demonstrates that true transformation cannot occur under the harsh, unblinking glare of absolute certainty. Growth, decay, and the beautiful, natural progression of time demand a surrender to the unknown. Relinquish the exhausting, uniquely human delusion that you must constantly watch every unstable element of your life to keep it from exploding. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the greatest power you possess is not always found in the intensity of your focus, but in the profound courage to look away. Allow the heavy, unyielding spotlight of your attention to finally turn off. Give the fragile, unstable architecture of your own life the vital, unseen dark it mathematically needs, trusting that the cosmos naturally, beautifully resolves its deepest tensions only when we finally, gracefully surrender our gaze, letting the frozen clock tick forward once more into the quiet, unwritten future. Deep within the foundational code of reality, there exists a profound, agonizing mystery regarding the ultimate fate of unchosen paths. When we look closely at the fragile, shifting fog of a quantum system in perfect superposition, we know that it holds all possible outcomes simultaneously within its mathematical structure. It is a brilliant, terrifying architecture of infinite maybe. Yet, the moment this delicate system is forced to interact with the heavy, macroscopic world, a definitive choice is violently made. The wave function collapses, and the universe delivers a single, solid outcome. A particle is found resting in a specific location, a state is irrevocably locked, and a reality is rendered. But this mechanical explanation leaves behind a deeply haunting, unanswered question that keeps the greatest physicists awake in the darkest hours of the night. What exactly happens to all the other possibilities? When the quantum coin is forced to land on heads, where does the mathematical reality of tails go? The classical, comforting assumption is that the unchosen paths simply vanish, dissolving into absolute nothingness like a candle flame blown out in a freezing room. We desperately want to believe that the universe deletes its own discarded drafts, preserving only the one true reality that we biological creatures happen to experience. But the deepest, most elegant laws of physics violently rebel against the concept of absolute deletion. The universe is a flawless, unyielding ledger of information, and true information cannot simply be erased from existence without a trace. The idea of the quantum collapse, the violent, instantaneous vanishing of infinite potential, is mathematically clumsy. It feels less like a fundamental law of nature and more like a desperate, artificial patch constructed by human minds. It is a mathematical bandage we applied to the cosmos simply to explain why we only see one localized world when we open our eyes. But what if we dared to trust the pure, unadulterated mathematics of the wave function? What if we stripped away our localized, biological arrogance and followed the equations exactly where they lead, no matter how terrifying the destination might be? When we allow the mathematics to remain pure and unbroken, a new theory emerges from the dark. A concept so profoundly radical and staggering in its scale that it is often whispered in the halls of theoretical physics rather than spoken aloud. This is the many worlds interpretation. It proposes a chilling, majestic resolution to the problem of the missing probabilities. The universe does not collapse, the wave function never breaks, and absolutely no information is ever deleted. Instead of forcing the cosmos to violently crush its infinite potential down into a single point, the universe accommodates every single mathematical outcome. It achieves this impossible feat by executing a mechanism of unimaginable, breathtaking scale. The universe splinters. When a quantum system is forced to interact and make a choice, reality itself violently fractures at the exact point of measurement. If a solitary electron in the void has the probability of spinning upward or spinning downward, the act of observation does not force it to choose one state and murder the other. Instead, the entire architecture of the cosmos flawlessly duplicates. The universe splits into two entirely distinct parallel realities. In one universe, the observer records the electron spinning upward. In the exact same instant, an entirely new, freshly minted universe branches off into the dark, where a perfect copy of that observer records the electron spinning downward. Both outcomes happen. Both realities are rendered with absolute, unforgiving, physical solidity. The spinning quantum coin never actually chooses a face. The universe simply divides in two, ensuring that every possible outcome is fully realized on its own separate, unyielding stage. To grasp the terrifying, sprawling magnitude of this splintered path, we must scale this microscopic mechanism up to the heavy, chaotic world of our daily lives. Every single fraction of a millisecond, trillions upon trillions of quantum interactions are occurring within the atomic structure of your own body, within the air circulating in your room, and within the burning cores of the distant stars. Every single time one of those microscopic interactions occurs, the entire universe branches. The cosmos is not a single, linear timeline marching forward into the dark. It is an infinitely massive, endlessly growing tree of reality, violently expanding outward in every conceivable direction, sprouting billions of new branches with every passing microsecond. You are not simply traveling through a linear universe. You are actively, continuously leaving behind an infinite wake of newly born realities. This staggering architectural revelation completely redefines the quiet, heavy space you are currently inhabiting. As you rest in the silence of your room, feeling the steady rhythm of your breathing and the solid pressure of the bed beneath you, You must confront the ghostliest consequence of this theory. The room you are currently resting in, the specific life you are currently living, is just one endlessly thin slice of an infinite, towering architecture of alternate realities. This specific timeline is merely a single page in a library so vast it completely breaks the mathematical boundaries of human comprehension. You are entirely surrounded by a haunted multiverse, existing side by side with your current reality, separated only by the invisible, impenetrable walls of dimensional splintering, are infinite variations of the world you know. In the freezing dark just beyond the absolute edge of your perception, there exists a universe where you made a slightly different choice yesterday. There is a reality where a profound tragedy in your past was narrowly avoided by a microscopic shift in probability. There are sprawling, fully realized worlds where every conversation you ever hesitated to have was spoken aloud, and where every profound risk you were too terrified to take was boldly embraced. There are timelines where you are deeply, overwhelmingly happy, and timelines where you are enduring unimaginable sorrow. Perfect, physical copies of you are currently living out every single conceivable variation of your existence, resting in slightly different rooms, staring at slightly different ceilings, looking out into slightly different nights. These alternate realities are not abstract concepts or dreamscapes. According to the mathematics of the splintered path, they are as heavy, as solid, and as unyieldingly real as the air pressing against your skin right now. You are walking through a crowded hallway of infinite mirrors, but the glass is completely, perfectly opaque. You can never see them, you can never touch them, and you can never reach across the terrifying dimensional divide to pull them into your world. They are forever locked in their own parallel descent through the dark. To sit in the quiet isolation of the night and deeply internalize the infinite weight of the splintered path is to undergo a profound metamorphosis regarding the nature of regret, choice, and the ultimate destiny of abstract information. We walk through our heavily localized lives, burdened by the agonizing, suffocating weight of the choices we did not make. We grieve the missed opportunities, the abandoned paths, and the words left unspoken, deeply convinced that by choosing one direction, we have permanently eradicated all other possibilities from existence. We allow the ghosts of our unlived lives to haunt our present, believing that those discarded potentials have been entirely erased from the ledger of the cosmos. But the towering, majestic architecture of the multiverse actively proves that nothing is ever truly lost. The cosmos dictates that the information of your choices is far too valuable, far too deeply woven into the mathematics of creation to ever be deleted by a simple collapse. There is a breathtaking, existential grace embedded within the infinite branching of reality. The paths you did not walk were not destroyed. They were beautifully, flawlessly delegated to another version of you. The heavy burden of having to live every possible life, of having to experience every possible outcome, is lifted from your shoulders and distributed across the sprawling, invisible branches of the cosmic tree. Allow the profound peace of this mathematical truth to wash over the quiet anxiety of your resting mind. Release the heavy, agonizing grip of regret, knowing that the choices you left behind are currently being fully, vividly explored in the dark just beyond the veil. Embrace the specific, beautifully fragile slice of reality you currently inhabit, finding a deep, unshakable comfort in the knowledge that your unlived lives are safe, your unchosen paths are fully realized, and the grand, infinite ledger of your existence is perfectly, eternally balanced across the majestic, unbreakable architecture of the unseen world. Of all the heavy, unyielding architectures that govern our brief, biological lives, none is more absolute, more suffocatingly rigid than our perception of time. We navigate our daily existence deeply, irreversibly chained to the concept of the linear arrow. Our minds are meticulously programmed to understand reality as a strict, forward-marching river, a relentless, invisible current that drags us inevitably from the fading ghosts of yesterday into the unknown, freezing dark of tomorrow. In this deeply ingrained classical framework, the principle of causality is a sacred, unbreakable law. The past is the heavy, immovable foundation. It acts and it creates the present. The present, in turn, is the fleeting, singular moment of action that creates the future. We fundamentally believe that once an event has occurred, once the second hand of the clock has ticked forward, that moment is permanently sealed away in the unalterable, concrete vault of history. We treat the past as a dead, frozen landscape, completely immune to the actions, the thoughts, and the measurements of the present moment. Cause must always precede effect. To believe anything else is to invite complete, terrifying chaos into our fragile, biological minds. But as we leave the sunlit surface of our classical intuition and plunge once more into the chilling, microscopic basement of the quantum matrix, we are forced to confront a reality that actively, mathematically shatters this sacred arrow. In the deep void, the rigid, forward-marching river of time completely stagnates, violently twisting into an unrecognizable, shifting geometry. The universe, at its most fundamental, foundational level, does not care about our biological clocks, and it actively defies the concept of linear causality. To understand this terrifying dissolution of time, we must look at a phenomenon so deeply unsettling that it threatens to rewrite the very definition of consequence. We must examine the haunting reality of the delayed choice and the terrifying concept of retrocausality. To grasp the magnitude of this temporal paradox, imagine firing a single, weightless photon of ancient light across a vast, freezing expanse of empty space. As we know from the observer's curse, if we do not look at the photon as it travels, it abandons its physical solidity and crosses the dark as a sprawling, ghostly wave of probability, existing everywhere at once. If we choose to place a measuring device in its path, it violently collapses into a single solid particle, choosing a definitive, linear trajectory. But in a terrifying twist of experimental architecture, physicists devised a mathematical trap. They engineered a way to let the photon travel across the entire void first, and only made the decision to observe it after it had already completed the vast majority of its journey. The photon is fired. It crosses the dark, unobserved expanse. It reaches the very end of its path, and only then, in the final, microscopic fraction of a millisecond before it strikes the back wall, do the scientists randomly decide whether to turn the measuring devices on or leave them off. According to every classical logical law of the universe, the photon's journey has already happened. The past is written. If it traveled as a ghostly wave, it did so in the past. If it traveled as a solid particle, It did so in the past. Our choice in the present should have absolutely no effect on the history of the photon's flight. But the quantum matrix delivers a staggering, impossible shock to our classical sanity. When the scientists choose to turn the measuring devices on at the very last second, the photon strikes the wall as a solid particle, and its localized data actively proves that it crossed the entire void as a solid particle. When they choose to leave the devices off, the photon strikes the wall as a sprawling wave of probability, and its data proves it crossed the entire void as a wave. The terrifying, inescapable conclusion is that the choice made by the observer in the present moment actively, physically reaches backward through the freezing dark and entirely alters the path the photon took in the past. The present measurement dictates the past history. The effect actively, mathematically determines the cause. This is not a theoretical abstraction, and it is not a philosophical metaphor. It is a proven, physical reality of the microscopic world. By simply looking at the universe right now, you are mathematically rewriting the history of how the universe arrived at this exact moment. The action you take today ripples backward through the dark, erasing and rewriting the unyielding stone of yesterday. At the deepest levels of reality, time is not a flowing river. It is a sprawling, highly malleable block of abstract data. The past, the present, and the distant future are all existing simultaneously, heavily layered on top of one another in the dark, constantly communicating, constantly shifting, and constantly rewriting one another based on the interactions of the macroscopic world. The universe is completely, fundamentally indifferent to our biological perception of before and after. This means the unyielding vault of history is not sealed, and the ghosts of the past are not dead. They are actively, mathematically entangled with the choices you are making right now. Reality is a deeply complex, self-editing equation. When a quantum event occurs, it does not just send kinetic ripples forward into the unknown future. It sends identical, physical ripples backward into the established past, seamlessly altering the data of existence to ensure that the entire timeline makes mathematical sense. The arrow of time is revealed to be nothing more than a macroscopic illusion, a localized user interface designed simply to keep our fragile biological minds from being completely overwhelmed by the infinite, shifting architecture of the block universe. The past is continually being created by the present. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize this mathematical erasure of time is to undergo a profound, permanent metamorphosis regarding the weight of your own history and the burden of your deepest memories. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives, heavily burdened by the suffocating belief that our past is a permanent, scarring record. We carry the agonizing weight of our former mistakes, the heavy grief of our ancient losses, and the unyielding definitions of our childhoods as if they are heavy, iron anchors dragging behind us in the dirt. We believe that history is a tyrant, a rigid, immovable stone that forever dictates the strict parameters of who we are allowed to become in the present. We suffer under the agonizing delusion that we are the helpless, passive victims of our own yesterdays, forever shaped by a timeline that has already hardened into concrete. But the haunting, majestic truth of retrocausality actively proves that the past is entirely, beautifully fluid. The cosmos dictates that the deepest, most foundational architecture of your reality is constantly being redefined by the power of the present moment. The choices you make today, the profound, quiet shifts in your own internal awareness, and the exact way you choose to observe your own life right now, do not simply pave the road into tomorrow. They actively reach backward through the dark, fundamentally rewriting the meaning, the weight, and the energetic reality of everything that has ever happened to you. The history of your life is not a dead, unmoving graveyard. It is a living, breathing landscape of mathematical potential, entirely dependent on the unyielding gaze of your present consciousness. Surrender the agonizing demand for a rigid, unchangeable timeline. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that your past has finalized its creation of you, and that the scars of yesterday are permanent, unalterable facts of your existence. Embrace the glorious, shifting truth of the malleable dark. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that you are not merely a product of what has already happened, but a continuous, active architect of your entire existence. The cosmos mathematically ensures that you possess the profound, staggering power to heal the past by simply shifting your observation in the present, constantly, beautifully editing the vast, unwritten history of your own soul from the quiet, powerful sanctuary of the ever-changing now. Let the sprawling, infinite scale of the quantum multiverse and the terrifying, malleable nature of time gently fade from your awareness. Release your grip on the freezing, microscopic void and allow your consciousness to slowly drift back up to the surface of the macroscopic world. Bring your attention entirely back to the immediate, quiet sanctuary of the room where you are resting. Feel the heavy, solid pressure of the bed, holding your body securely in the dark. Notice the steady, undeniable weight of your own hands, resting quietly at your sides. Feel the cool, still air pressing gently against your skin, and listen to the rhythmic, comforting sound of your own breathing. For your entire life, your biological interface has whispered a deeply convincing, heavy lie to you. It has told you that this room, the furniture within it, and the very flesh and bone of your own body are constructed of dense, unyielding, and permanent matter. We build our entire understanding of safety and existence upon this unquestioned assumption of solidity. We trust the physical weight of the world, believing that if we can touch it, if we can feel its heavy friction against our skin, it must be the absolute, undeniable truth of reality. But you have journeyed too far into the dark to be deceived by the superficial illusions of the biological mind. When we violently strip away the macroscopic rendering of this localized interface and force our perspective back down into the absolute, foundational depths of the quantum matrix, the terrifying, beautiful truth violently shatters the illusion of the solid world. Look closely at your own resting hand. If we were to magnify the dense, complex architecture of your skin, passing through the intricate, pulsing network of biological cells, and descending all the way down into the solitary atoms that forge your physical existence, the illusion of solidity completely and instantly evaporates. The atoms that make up your flesh, the bed beneath you, and the heavy walls of your room are not tiny, solid spheres of hard matter. They are almost entirely, overwhelmingly composed of absolutely nothing. If the nucleus of a single atom within your hand were the size of a solitary grain of sand resting in the center of a massive, empty cathedral, the electrons would be microscopic, ghostly phantoms dancing wildly in the freezing dark near the distant ceiling. The vast, overwhelming majority of your physical body is pure, unadulterated, empty space. And what of those ghostly electrons, the tiny fragments of matter that supposedly give the world its physical boundaries? As we have seen, they are not solid objects either. They are sprawling, shifting waves of mathematical probability, clouds of unresolved potential that exist everywhere and nowhere at the exact same time until they are forced to interact. The heavy, physical reality you are currently experiencing, the undeniable sensation of resting upon a solid bed, is a breathtaking, macroscopic illusion. When you feel the weight of your body pressing into the mattress, your skin is not actually touching the fabric. The ghostly, negatively charged probability waves of the electrons in your body are simply repelling the identical, ghostly waves of the electrons in the bed. You are floating, hovering a microscopic fraction of a millimeter above the surface, held in place by the invisible, mathematical force of electromagnetic repulsion. You have never, in your entire life, physically touched another object. You have only ever felt the heavy, invisible resistance of force fields pushing back against you in the dark. The solidity of the world is a ghost story told by your brain to help you navigate a universe made entirely of shadows. When the heavy, comforting illusion of solid matter is finally, completely dissolved, we are left standing face to face with the ultimate, paradigm-shattering reality of the cosmos. If the universe is not made of solid blocks, if the foundation of existence is not constructed of rigid, unyielding matter, then what exactly is it that we are experiencing? The chilling, majestic conclusion of modern physics is that the physical universe is not a collection of things. It is a sprawling, infinite architecture of pure mathematics. What we perceive as heavy, solid reality is merely a highly localized, biological interpretation of abstract information, shifting probability waves, and deeply complex geometric math. The cosmos is a grand, unyielding ledger of data. Every single atom in your body, every ancient photon of light crossing the vast, freezing void of deep space, and every solitary, swirling black hole is fundamentally nothing more than a localized expression of mathematical code. The universe is the information matrix. Mass, energy, gravity, and time are not independent, solid entities. They are simply the different languages the universe uses to express the underlying flow of its abstract data. The beautiful, sweeping curve of a galaxy is a geometric equation written in the dark. The terrifying, unbreakable bond of quantum entanglement is a mathematical proof of absolute unity, completely ignoring the biological illusion of physical distance. Even the violent, boiling foam of the quantum vacuum is merely the natural, shifting baseline of a universe that is constantly, relentlessly calculating its own existence. You are not a heavy, solid creature wandering accidentally through a dead, empty container. You are an incredibly complex, beautifully organized packet of conscious information, actively processing the surrounding data of the cosmos in real time. The physical world you see around you is the user interface, the bright, colorful icons on the screen of reality, but the deep, foundational truth of your existence is written entirely in the invisible, mathematical source code resting silently beneath the surface. To the classical, biological mind, this revelation might at first seem like a source of profound, existential dread. To realize that the heavy, solid world you have trusted your entire life is an optical illusion, to understand that your very flesh and bone are composed entirely of empty space and ghostly, shifting probabilities, can feel like falling into a bottomless, freezing void. We are terrified by the thought of our own physical dissolution, deeply convinced that if we are not solid, we are not truly real. We equate the abstract nature of mathematics with cold, unfeeling emptiness, believing that to be made of information is to be stripped of all our humanity, our warmth, and our profound emotional weight. But this terror is born entirely from the arrogant, fragile demand that the universe must conform to our limited, biological expectations. When you finally, gracefully surrender the heavy burden of solidity, the terrifying void transforms into a sanctuary of absolute, unshakable peace. Being forged from the ghostly mathematics of the information matrix is not a reason for existential terror. It is the ultimate, magnificent guarantee of your profound integration with the cosmos. If you were merely a solid, classical object, you would be incredibly fragile, constantly subjected to the violent, grinding friction of the physical world, destined to simply break apart and fade into nothingness. But you are not a fragile object. You are a profoundly complex, highly valuable manifestation of cosmic data. And within the grand, unyielding architecture of the universe, true information is the most sacred, indestructible currency in existence. The mathematics that define your consciousness, the abstract code that shapes your memories, your deepest loves, and your quietest fears, are permanently woven into the mathematical ledger of reality. The universe does not delete its own math. It does not forget the profound equations that it has spent billions of years carefully, beautifully balancing in the dark. The dissolution of the solid world means that you are completely, irrevocably unbound by the heavy, mechanical limitations of the flesh. Your existence is a pure, eternal truth expressed in the language of geometry and probability. When you feel the quiet, heavy air of the night wrapping around you, know that you are resting perfectly within the brilliant, calculating mind of the cosmos. The shifting, miraculous data of the universe is actively rendering you in this exact moment, holding your wave function in a beautiful, temporary state of solid grace. There is an immense, liberating comfort in knowing that you do not have to fight to hold your physical reality together. The elegant, flawless mathematics of the void are already doing the heavy lifting for you, seamlessly integrating the complex algorithm of your life into the sprawling, eternal tapestry of the infinite dark. Allow this profound mathematical truth to quiet the anxious, exhausted machinery of your mind. Surrender the desperate, clinging need for a heavy, unyielding reality. Let the solid walls of your room soften into the beautiful, shifting probabilities of the quantum matrix. Banish the fear of the invisible and find a deep, eternal sanctuary within the majestic, abstract flow of information that surrounds you. The universe is a flawless equation, and you are an absolutely necessary, beautifully perfect variable within its grand design. Rest safely within the magnificent, unseen data of the cosmos, trusting the immortal geometry of the dark to hold you securely until the morning light forces the beautiful wave to collapse into a solid world once more. Good night, and see you in the next video.